Part 53. 10,000 times return. I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 521. The guest who stepped in from outside the starfield surprised Su Xian. This guest was not a god who stood in the second god envoy camp, but a god who had been of great help to Blue Star, Su Ying's teacher. Su Xian did not expect Su Ying's teacher to suddenly appear. Su Xian was very familiar with that kind of power and would never make a mistake. Su Xian. The person was in a hazy state, without a human entity, like a patchwork of mirrors. In the chaotic world, the human race is not the absolute master, and it is normal for the Supreme God to have all kinds of strange incarnations. Su Xian was stunned for a moment, not knowing how to call him. Mirror God. Su Ying's teacher introduced himself. Su Xian glanced at the mirror god. In a sense, these supreme gods did achieve the ultimate in some aspects. For example, the mirror god could switch between reality and illusion at will. It could even control whether any particle of the body was virtual or visible. I wonder why the mirror god came, Su Xian asked with a smile. You have fought with the second god's envoy, and you should know that she has great ambitions. Her plans even surpass those of the former supreme god, the god of destiny. The mirror god threw out the heavy news as soon as he arrived, and then said, you should not be very clear about the understanding of the god's envoy, right? Su Xian nodded. Although he got a small amount of information from the Taiji Tiandi sword, he still lacked the overall understanding of the god's envoy. He only knew that there were 12 gods' envoys in the chaos world. Inherited the power of the 12 supreme gods who had fallen. The mirror god said, in fact, the messengers of the gods are no longer the same as the 12 supreme gods. Their ideas are also completely different. The 12 supreme gods only want to break the rules. But the messengers of the gods who have received the supreme source of power are not like this. Perhaps it is because of the infiltration of the universe rules, or they have a very strong obsession with life before they get this power. Su Xian asked, I wonder how many messengers of the gods are still alive now. Before that, shouldn't you listen to the story of that great existence? The mirror god smiled and said, speaking of which, I also received the favor of that great existence, so I took this opportunity to repay the favor. I thought that person would return from the endless time and space, but he did not do that. Speaking of this, the mirror god paused. If he really comes back, you might be the one who dies. You inherited his will, are his successor, and are also his chess piece. You can also say that you are his reincarnation, but now I feel that you are you. Comparing you is disrespectful to him and an insult to you. You are all independent life forms. The mirror god smiled, perhaps this is the mind of the god of creation. Su Xian was not too surprised by the words of the mirror god. He had guessed some of it a long time ago. It was because of this that he admired the great existence, was determined to complete the unfinished things, and was also fighting for his own goals. The mirror god told Su Xian everything that happened that year. Including the birth of the 12 gods, he also told Su Xian. Among the 12 envoys now, the most powerful one is the envoy of the god of fate, who calls himself the Fateful One. His strength even surpasses the original supreme god. He is the first envoy and the undisputed #1 combat power in the chaos world. Of course, this does not include the god of death who likes to wander in the endless void, but the god of death has long since stopped belonging to the chaos world. Perhaps what the god of death thinks is similar to that great being. Mirror god sighed, but this person has a very strange personality. He has the most powerful combat power, but he has no ambition. As long as his territory is not invaded, he never takes the initiative to do anything. I just don't know how the second envoy Crying Eyes persuaded him, so that he would occasionally help the second envoy and other gods. No wonder. Su Xian recalled the previous battle with the second envoy, and the latter did use the power of the first envoy Fateful One. Mirror God continued to tell the story. Next is the second messenger, the Eye of Weeping. He is a combination of strength and wisdom, inheriting the power of the supreme god of destiny. He is very cunning, and no life has ever seen his trump card. What exactly is he planning? It is still a mystery. Is he seeking transcendence of rules? It seems not to be the case. In short, you must be careful of him. Just by listening to the tone of the mirror god, Su Xian could hear that he was afraid of the Eye of Weeping. This messenger of God was indeed very hidden. His ability was known from the fact that he was able to penetrate the gray film. If it weren't for the great existence who arranged enough back UPS, I'm afraid the Eye of Weeping would have achieved its goal. The third envoy of God, named Good and Evil Bird, has two completely different divinities in his body. He was originally the king of the bird family, and later accepted the power of the god of space. He once challenged the Fated One. The final result is unknown, but the combat power of the Good and Evil Bird is not much weaker than that of the Fated One. The third envoy of God, Good and Evil Bird, now also rules an area of the Chaos world. He has fought with many envoys of God, but it was not a fight for interests, but just a simple preference. Su Xian nodded. He did not sense any breath about the Good and Evil Bird. That person should not have participated in the fight for the Blue Star world. The fourth envoy of God belongs to the camp of the second envoy of God. His name is Conqueror. He is good at all kinds of weapons and likes fighting very much. The reason why he joined the second God's envoy camp was that he hoped to use the ninth God's envoy's silent city to teleport to various places and challenge various strong men. Listening to what the mirror god said, Su Xian suddenly found that the God's envoys were indeed quite different from what he imagined. These God's envoys did not have much intention to break through to a higher realm, but instead did what they wanted to do at will. I hope there will not be too much conflict with these God's envoys in the future. Of course, if the conflict cannot be avoided, he will definitely not have any mercy. The mirror god does not care about Su Xian's thoughts. He came only to repay a favor. As for what will happen next, he will not continue to intervene. The cause and effect between him and that great existence should also end here. Warm Ti. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 522. The fifth envoy of God is called Invisible, and he inherited the supreme source power of the God of Illusion. Mirror God continued. Invisible is a very special existence. He did not want to be an envoy of God, but he still became one because of the combination of the source power of the God of Illusion and his weird spirit. He basically became a mad god. Because he could not fully control his power, he was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. He would hate everything. The envoys of God have their own stories. The fifth envoy of God, Invisible, is the most miserable one among the envoys of God. Because he was too crazy, Invisible was imprisoned by many envoys of God and was imprisoned in the underground of the Chaos world a long time ago. Speaking of this, the tone of Mirror God became more serious. It was the second God messenger, the Weeping Eye, who proposed to imprison the Invisible One. Perhaps he wanted to use the fifth God messenger, the Invisible One, to carry out some plots. That's true. The Insect King with the power of the Invisible One was transferred to the Sorrow Cave, which you call the battlefield of two worlds, but he himself should not know it. It was all planned by the second God messenger. Listening to it, Su Xian couldn't help but sigh that the Weeping Eye was so crazy. Not only did it plot against the Blue Star world, but it also carried out a series of activities in the Chaos world. No wonder the creator of the ninth God messenger was not completely loyal. He could only say that the God messengers with brains were too ambitious, and the God messengers without brains could only become fish meat. Of course, the predecessor of the God messenger might have been a pitiful life. Like this fifth God messenger, who did nothing, just because he was chosen by the supreme origin of the God of transformation, he fell into a state of schizophrenia and collapse. The power of the sixth envoy has also appeared in the Blue Star world. Mirror God continued, you should be familiar with the sixth envoy Black Plague. One of his clones is in the source of the plague in the forbidden area of the battlefield between the two worlds. For any life world, he is an extremely evil existence. Any place polluted by his power will fall into endless pain. Su Xian was a little surprised, so the black rat at the source of the plague is just a clone of the sixth envoy. His power is indeed very corrosive. In order to unlock the restrictions of this forbidden area, he and Su Ying paid a heavy price. Su Ying removed the 4 runes, his realm dissipated, and he became an ordinary person. Fortunately, he was able to reshape his bones in the end. That battle was also the most difficult battle in the 4 forbidden areas. Mirror God sighed. The sixth envoy was a pitiful life at first, because he was not too powerful before inheriting the supreme source power, which led to him curling up after inheriting the power. At first, he did not provoke any life, but because of his own power, countless lives regarded him as a curse. Finally, the second envoy also proposed to imprison him. Because other envoys were also afraid of the power of the Black Plague, they worked together to imprison him. The second envoy again, Su Xian rubbed his head. It seemed that these envoys who did not realize it were destined to become the pawns of the second envoy. No one noticed it at the time. Mirror God said sadly, but it was too late later. The situation had long fallen into the control of the second envoy, not to mention that many envoys did not have much ambition to fight. If it was before, Su Xian would not care. But now he has to care, because the purified supreme source power of the envoys can be absorbed by the disciples, and then feed back to the world, a win-win situation. And the expansion of the world does not need to sacrifice any party, but to draw various energies from the chaotic void to help the world expand. The seventh God envoy is still a pitiful life. Mirror God continued, the seventh God envoy inherited the supreme source power of the devouring God. He originally belonged to the original spirit clan and had only instinctive consciousness at first. After inheriting the supreme source power of the devouring God, he fell into endless devouring. As he continued to devour, his size became larger and larger. So, he was also imprisoned. Mirror God was quite helpless. He was a supreme God who survived the old era. Those gods only hated him and would not let him participate in internal decisions. Unlike other imprisoned gods, the seventh God envoy devourer has broken the prison many times. His power is naturally devouring and corrosive, and the prison is also devoured by him. The gods can only slow down his devouring speed, but cannot stop it. He now occupies a large part of the eastern part of the chaos world and devours all the world energy there. The fifth, sixth, and seventh gods are all lives without much independent consciousness, which surprised Su Xian. I thought that all the gods were chess players, but now it seems that they are all chess pieces, and each one is more outrageous than the other. The eighth god, the infinite, inherited the supreme source power of the god of the sea source, controlled the entire sea area of the chaos world, and possessed infinite spiritual power. In the ocean, he is the undisputed overlord, and even the faithful must avoid his edge. I don't know much about him. Among the gods, the mirror god described the eighth god the least, and it was also because the eighth god monopolized all the sea areas, and it was difficult for other gods to communicate with him. As for the ninth god, you have already seen it. It is the maker who inherited the supreme source power of the god of manufacturing, and has a strong creativity. Almost half of the technology in the entire chaos world was developed by the maker. He was originally a god from the second divine envoy camp. When you showed your power not long ago, he had already rebelled. You saw it at that time. Now he also occupies an exclusive area in the chaotic world, but the second divine envoy will definitely not let him go, Mirror God said. Su Xian was a witness to the scene where the maker of the ninth divine envoy betrayed the second divine envoy. He had also expected this scene. For the Blue Star world, the weaker the power of the second Divine Envoy camp is, the better. After all, the Blue Star Great World is currently planning only the second Divine Envoy. The position of the 10th Divine Envoy is temporarily vacant. Mirror God smiled and said, speaking of which, there is a long-standing story. There was a 9th Divine Envoy before the Maker. It is really true that the Maker is the 10th Divine Envoy. The original 9th Divine Envoy was named the Explosive Dragon King. He inherited the supreme power of the Explosive Dragon God and possessed overwhelming power. Those who faced fate in a head-on battle would not fall behind. He was the first Divine Envoy to stand up and expose the second Divine Envoy's plot, and started an unprecedented battle with him. He once caused a lot of trouble to the second Divine Envoy. In the end, he was trapped by the design of the second Divine Envoy and was besieged to death by the gods of the chaotic world. He was also the earliest Divine Envoy to die. He was even deprived of the title of God's Messenger. After his death, his supreme source of divine power was nowhere to be found. The second Divine Envoy once tried to take it away, but in the end he failed. So far, there is still no successor to the supreme original power of the Explosive Dragon God. Mirror God's tone gradually became heavier. In other words, his power has been intercepted. And there are only two people in this universe who have this ability, the Weeping Eye and the God of Death. The Weeping Eye failed, so it is certain that the supreme source of divine power has been taken away by the God of Death. Hearing this, Su Xian's face changed slightly, and he suddenly thought of something. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 523. Did the God of Death take away the supreme power of the God of Exploding Dragon? Su Xian remembered that when he broke into the 44th floor of the Death Tower, he encountered a level that was completely different from other lives. The guardian of the 44th floor was the phantom of the giant dragon. At the beginning, he only thought that the phantom was very powerful, and its body must be even more powerful, and it might even be a god. In the end, after the giant dragon disappeared, a wisp of flame was left. Could this wisp of flame be related to the god of Exploding Dragon? Thinking of this, Su Xian directly took out the wisp of flame from the system space. It's the breath of the Exploding Dragon King. The mirror spirit immediately sensed something, and he was quite puzzled. How could this thing be in your hands? When that great existence disappeared, the 12 gods had not yet been born. When the Exploding Dragon King died, he had no contact with this star field at all. No. The mirror spirit reacted. Is it the God of Death? The power of the God of Death is unfathomable. Even the second God Envoy never takes the initiative to provoke the God of Death. Similarly, the God of Death rarely deals with other lives. The only thing he was passionate about was planting the Tower of Delusion and the Tower of Death in each small world. Maybe there is some friendship between the God of Death and that great being. Su Xian smiled. Probably. When the 16 supreme gods fought, the God of Death was the first to understand, and then withdrew from the fight and traveled far into the endless void. They all knew that before leaving, the God of Death had talked with that great being for a long time. He also felt that the God of Death should have realized something that the other supreme gods had not realized. After traveling in the endless void for a long time, the God of Death created a Tower of Despair with 100 floors in the Chaos world. It is said that each floor is like a small world. In these small worlds, there are either powerful tribes guarding them or extraordinary strong people occupying them. The Tower of Despair is also a landmark building in the entire Chaos world. According to the guidance of this flame, we should be able to find the supreme source of divine power left behind after the fall of the Explosive Dragon King. Mirror God said. I'll try. Su Xian injected the original divine power into the flame, and soon felt a ray of guidance. His eyes followed the guidance of his heart and looked far beyond the star field. The source of guidance was in the chaos world. He felt a mysterious tower, exuding a breath of despair. It was the Tower of Despair. Mirror God also noticed it. Su Xian said, "It seems that the supreme original divine power is hidden in the Tower of Despair by the God of Death, waiting for me to take it." "You can't take it?" Mirror God said seriously, "The Supreme God cannot enter there, and you are now at the level of the Supreme God. The Tower of Despair only allows God-level life to enter at most. Only God-level life." Su Xian thought of his disciples first. "I believe that it won't take time, and his disciples will all be able to break through the God level. It's not that a God-level life can do it." Mirror God said again, "If you want to bring out the supreme origin power of the exploding Dragon King, you must at least be compatible with its power, otherwise you will only be backlashed by the supreme origin power. Even in the form of unconscious dominance, the supreme origin power is not something that ordinary God-level life can touch." This. Su Xian didn't expect there were so many rules and regulations. Should I send a disciple? He thought about it. Among these disciples, there was only one who could be close to the attributes of the god of exploding dragon, and that was Xyli. All along the way, Xyli's method was extremely simple and crude, with only one hammer. If one hammer doesn't work, then another hammer. Xyli already had the foundation of a god-level life, so this breakthrough might be quick. Mirror God didn't continue to ask. How to obtain the supreme origin power of the god of exploding dragon was something Su Xian should solve himself, and it had nothing to do with her. There is nothing much to say about the 11th envoy. The Lord of the Abyss, who inherited the original power of the god of demons, has fallen in your hands. The last envoy is the Holy Light, who inherited the original power of the god of light. He is not in the chaos world, but wanders in various small worlds in various life forms. He seems to have no desires. Saving the suffering of the world is what makes him happiest. The Mirror God stood up. He had told Su Xian everything he should tell him. He only hoped to win the fight with the second envoy, otherwise the situation in the chaos world would be overturned. Although he also saw through it. Even if it was overturned, he could go far away to the endless void, but after all, it was the soil where he was born, and he had some feelings for it. The endless void was too dark. Even if the god of death did not say that he had found the second chaos world, he would not go if he could. Not everyone likes to wander. I should go. After chatting for a long time, the Mirror God stood up and prepared to leave. Don't you want to meet Su Ying? Su Xian smiled and said, you are her teacher after all, and Su Ying has always wanted to see you. No. Mirror God smiled and said, I don't take these feelings too seriously, and she is your wife. It's a bit inappropriate for her to call me teacher. When you are done with the affairs of the Blue Star world, if there is fate, let's meet again. In the eyes of the Mirror God, Lin Su Ying is just a passing guest like a wisp of smoke. If it weren't for that great existence, he might not even remember this name. Su Xian didn't care. He couldn't ask a super life that was born as a god-level life and soon achieved the highest level of life with the feelings of the human race. The two have completely different views on feelings. Gone. The Mirror God disappeared in the star field. Su Xian was quite emotional. After the Mirror God explained his doubts, he finally saw the overall situation clearly and knew how much the great existence had paid. Because of this, he deserved his admiration even more. He was more like a shade for future generations. The one who planted this tree must make this towering tree flourish. While Su Xian was communicating with the Mirror God. In the northern area of the Chaos world, there are energy stations that supply the entire Chaos world's technological equipment. A giant lightning tower suddenly descended in the center of the energy area. It was the ninth God Maker. The Maker was no longer decadent as before, with a crazy smile on his face. He finally waited for this day. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to let us know. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 524. Since coming to the Chaos World, the Maker has mastered the power of technology that is comparable to the Supreme. The price is that his body is destroyed. In an experiment to create the Silent City, he suffered extremely serious injuries, and he could only survive by relying on the connection of the Silent City. The Supreme Origin divine power he obtained was also scattered in the technology of the Chaos World. Later, he learned that all this was planned by the second God Envoy, and the purpose was to quietly seize the origin power of these God Envoys. In order to regain these powers, he used the power of the second God Envoy to build technological facilities that control the entire Chaos World. Now, except for a few areas, most areas of the Chaos World have been controlled by the second God Envoy. The second God Envoy's ability to play with the mind is extremely powerful, making most lives willing to serve him, and some are forcibly controlled by him. The Maker, who had long discovered all this, silently endured it. He has been waiting for an opportunity to get rid of the second God Envoy and regain control of the Supreme Origin divine power. Su Xian's containment created this opportunity for him. As long as the second divine envoy could not catch up with him in the first place, his plan would succeed. Now the second divine envoy was forced to use the teleportation array to leave because of Su Xian's coercion. And he had already made restrictions near the teleportation array. As long as he could delay for a while, it would be too late even if the second divine envoy came back. Come back. My origin. The Maker opened his hands, and the entire northern part of the Chaos World burst into brilliant lightning, which was madly injected into the lightning tower. With the support of infinite energy, the former power returned. Even the small objects he created were transformed into God-level life one by one. Such a huge movement also alarmed the residents of the entire Chaos World. They could all see the flashing lightning in the northern area, which was the energy core. If something went wrong with the energy core, countless lives would die in the Chaos World. In an instant, hundreds of powerful auras rushed into the sky and rushed towards the northern energy station. They were the most powerful God-level lives outside the Chaos World except for several supreme gods and gods. That's it. The City of Silence. It's the ninth god. Why is there no sign of the second god? They quickly realized that the ninth god wanted to absorb the energy station and regain his former power. Stop him. A god-level life immediately rushed out. If it is absorbed, most of the Chaos World will collapse. The loss of the energy station is indeed a disaster for many lives. The creator of the ninth god looked at the god-level lives rushing towards him fiercely. These source forces originally belong to me, what qualifications do you have to rob them? The hearts of the god-level lives were moved. Indeed, the energy station was originally created by the ninth god. If the ninth god was in his heyday, they would naturally not dare to offend him. But the current ninth god is nothing at all. They have become accustomed to the existence of the energy station, and it also involves countless interests. They can even feel the supreme from it. So they will never let the ninth god take the energy station. Even if the energy core once belonged to the ninth god, it has now become a part of the Chaos World. The ninth divine envoy was also shocked by the madness of the god-level beings. The Tower of Silence, which was halfway through absorbing energy, suddenly froze. A hideous mask condensed on the sky. Crying eyes, demon tears. The ninth divine envoy's face changed. He didn't expect the second divine envoy to come so quickly. He hesitated for a moment and plunged directly into the energy core. The surging power poured into his body. Boom! At this moment, a more powerful aura appeared. The Fateful. Seeing this figure, the ninth divine envoy was terrified. He saw the Fateful took action and directly cut off the influx of energy, but did not launch a second attack. The sudden stop of the energy infusion made the ninth divine envoy stunned in mid-air. He saw more and more figures surrounding him. There were inevitably many familiar faces among them. He still remembered that when he first came here, the technological power here was not developed, and it was he who taught countless technological ways. Among these familiar faces, more than 90% had been his students. At this moment, they participated in the siege of him mercilessly. Perhaps these lives have already betrayed him. Kill. He saw his most proud student wielding the sharpest weapon, and the technological weapons were blasting towards him. He didn't even need the second envoy to take action. At this moment, he finally felt lonely. Beside him, only those little dolls rushed out without hesitation, and finally turned into ashes and scattered. Sure enough, only they will accompany me forever. He shed tears as he watched the dolls he had created being smashed one by one. The attack in front did not weaken at all. He knew that he would die here, just like the exploding Dragon King who was besieged to death, and died under the justice of countless lives. And the second envoy was the preacher of justice. He had never shown his killing intention to any envoy, but imprisoned all of them in the name of justice. I am not willing to accept it. Even if I die, I can't die here. The Creator felt a strong unwillingness in his heart. He is not without resistance. He has already obtained half of the energy core, which is enough for him to activate the Silent City and send him to another place. Crying your plan will never succeed. It is impossible to devour us and step into that higher level. The ninth envoy roared, and the thunder tower behind him burst into a dazzling light that covered the entire northern territory. Even the god-level life could not open their eyes. The violent space fluctuations spread. This is the last thing he can do. I hope that the envoys who are still following the second envoy can wake up. But the first envoy Fateful just stood there, without any expression, as if he had not heard it at all, and maintained absolute trust in the second envoy. Boom. Driven by the Maker, the energy of the Silent City burned instantly. The terrifying space force spread, taking the ninth envoy away. The energy station became much dimmer, and the second envoy felt the fluctuations in the space and quickly locked the position of the Maker. There is the Blue Star World. The demon tier mask burst out with terrifying power, representing the anger of the second envoy. He did not expect the ninth envoy to be so resolute. Knowing that he would die, he did not fight to the death, but chose to teleport to the star field where the Blue Star World was located. The ninth envoy's purpose was already very clear. It was obvious that he wanted to send the Supreme Origin Divine Power to Su Xian and completely disrupt his plan. The first envoy, the Fateful One, did not say a word and left expressionlessly. In his eyes, all failures and successes were fate. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 525. Blue Star World, Star Territory. Su Xian is waiting for his disciples' breakthrough and preparing the next plan. In the main battlefield of Blue Star World, he is now an absolutely invincible god. Even if the number 1 god envoy destiny comes, he will have to lie down here. But leaving here, there are still too many unknowns. So he must be fully prepared. Boom. At this moment, strong space fluctuations swayed in the star field outside the Blue Star World. Here we go again. Su Xian frowned, and his figure disappeared from the spot. When he rushed there, he saw a different scene than he had imagined. There was only one enemy coming, and that was the Maker of the ninth divine envoy. It looked like he was seriously injured and his breath was weak. He recalled what the Mirror God said before. The ninth divine envoy broke with the second divine envoy and monopolized an area. he would definitely be liquidated by the second divine envoy. Now it seems that is indeed the case. The ninth divine envoy was completely no match for the second divine envoy's methods. Su Xian, the creator of the decayed aura, looked at Su Xian. Kill me, intercept my supreme source of divine power, and never let the second god succeed. Su Xian didn't know what this was. Any luck? He also knew that the second divine envoy had designs on all the divine envoys, including the strongest first divine envoy, but the first divine envoy didn't seem to mind. Are you willing to die like this? Su Xian asked, the sword in his hand already raised. Who would be willing to do that? The Maker smiled sadly and said, after my death, the supreme source of divine power will automatically be unified. You have the most supreme source of power in your hands, so the source of power scattered in the chaotic world will also gather here. It's up to you whether you can seize this opportunity. Although I don't hope you can win, I hate the second divine envoy even more. Got it? Su Xian nodded, and slashed down the Tai Chi Heavenly Emperor sword in his hand, ending the life of the Maker. Even if there was no internal strife, he would still find trouble with the Creator. This guy is not a good person and is already in his hunting plan. The Maker dies. The supreme source of divine power wanted to escape, but was directly intercepted and suppressed by Su Xian. At the same time, the original forces scattered in the chaotic world also gathered bit by bit. There are crying masks condensed in the distant void. A rolling sound came. Su Xian, intercepting the supreme source of divine power is not a good thing for you, give up. The world of chaos is the final destination. This time the second divine envoy did not choose to fight, but to persuade. If you are just for the life of the Blue Star world, the chaos world will be the best place for them to live. Faced with the persuasion of the second divine envoy, Su Xian did not understand its meaning, but he did not give any answer. Action is the best answer. Of course he won't give up. You'll regret it. Just like that guy, he made the wrong choice, and so did you. The crying mask dissipated, and the second divine envoy knew that he couldn't grab it, so he left quickly. Sensing the distant chaotic world, Su Xian felt that if there was no second divine envoy and the rules of the universe that might have given birth to self-awareness, the two big worlds may be able to coexist peacefully. Su Xian sat in the star field, quietly waiting for the ninth god envoy's original divine power to condense. Judging from the uncontrollable supreme original power, the rules of the universe must have given birth to self-awareness. Perhaps this was the case a long time ago, and that great being lost to the rules of the universe. In other words, he lost to himself. So that person has to use another way to win, and he does the same. It would be too scary to live under the rules of the universe with self-awareness. It is also an injustice to many lives. The waiting lasted for a long time. Xiaoli became the second breakthrough, a god-level life that condensed the will of freedom. At the same time, Su Xian's power also increased again. Dad, Xiaoli came to Su Xian after the breakthrough. Feeling Xiaoli's power, Su Xian was able to determine that the supreme original power left by the Dragon King was most suitable for Xiaoli. It seemed that sooner or later the Tower of Despair would have to make a comeback. Shortly after Xiaoli's breakthrough, Xiao Yuiwei became the third disciple to condense the divine will of freedom. Then there is the fourth one, Xiao Qi Nicola Lin. Fifth and sixth are Su Xiaoxiao and Su Xiaojin. The two brothers and sisters have almost the same breakthrough. The seventh one is Sun Xiaokong. The eighth is Wuxin. The ninth one is Lao Lu, who has eaten a lot of good things. The breakthrough speeds of these disciples were not far behind each other. During this period, Lin Suiying also completed a breakthrough and successfully condensed the will of freedom. At this point, only two disciples are still comprehending. The third child Xian Yuan Qingqing and the fifth child Miao Tian. The former took an extremely difficult path. He relied on a different method to become a god without much reference. It was destined to be an extremely difficult path. Even the maker of the ninth god's envoy didn't find his way entirely on his own. So the road ahead for the third child is destined to be difficult. Nowadays, the entire Blue Star world is filled with various technological items developed by Ching Ching, but there is still some distance between them and the true god level. Su Xian could sense that as long as Lao San broke through, he would be able to absorb the supreme divine power of the ninth divine envoy. He also believes that with King King's character, he will be able to achieve a breakthrough. What worries him most is Miao Tian, because Miao Tian was affected by the power of ghosts and gods early on, and it is destined that it is not so easy to condense the free will of conflict. Days passed by. The two never made a breakthrough, but Moira, the darling of the previous era, finally got what she wanted and condensed the free will. Moira's breakthrough is a great encouragement to the entire Lulin Star. Especially those who once chose to firmly follow Moira and support the Blue Star world with the elves. They cheered and were glad that they did not waver. In the most dangerous time, they were almost exterminated, and finally they got their reward. Now they occupy more fertile soil in this world with richer spiritual energy, and the tribe has a better future. With Moira's breakthrough, the three major plates of the Blue Star world have been completely stabilized, leaving only the gray star plate still vacant. Time passes. 1 year after Moira's breakthrough, the third child Xianyu and Ching Ching finally realized a unique way, and condensed the free will of God through the path of alchemy technology, which was unprecedented in history. After the breakthrough, Xianyu and King King's half-century hair disappeared, and she returned to the 3,000 black silks of a girl, and her face was permanently fixed. Just like the first time she met her teacher. Miao Tian, who was affected by the power of ghosts and gods, fell last. Miao Tian enjoyed 20 years of youth and frivolity, but the road after that was not smooth. He broke through himself again, and fell into another puzzle area. Everyone in the sect was looking forward to the fifth child being able to break free from the shackles again and live out his own self. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 526. Half a year after Xianyu and King King's breakthrough, Miao Tian finally got rid of the influence of ghost power, found himself again, condensed free will, and transformed into a god-level life. So far, all 11 disciples have broken through. Su Xian's power has once again grown explosively. He can feel that the system in his body has been almost drained and has probably reached its limit. Su Xian feels that he can now go to the forces of the chaos world for a collision. During Miao Tian's breakthrough, the third brother Xianyu and Ching Ching also successfully merged the purified supreme origin power of the ninth god envoy and reached a new level. Now his combat power is not weak enough to go to the chaos world. He can feel that the plan of the second god envoy is about to close, and he has to act as soon as possible. If the second god envoy takes away the supreme origin power of other god envoys, it will become a very troublesome thing. Teacher, are you finally ready to go? Xyli was eager to try and very excited. The first battle in the god realm, I am also looking forward to it. Sun Xiaokang's eyes burned with a strong desire to fight. Since the end of the first battle in the abyss, he has not enjoyed a hearty duel for a long time. Miao Tian was relatively calm. He just wanted to see the ghost god. But according to the teacher, the ghost god is not an absolute evil god, and has not participated in the struggle of the 12 gods. Instead, it is a bit like the god of death. He likes to spread violent plague seeds everywhere and look for successors. The sixth was the most excited, and tears of joy flowed from the corners of his mouth, because he knew that there must be a lot of delicious food there. It had to have a full meal. The seventh Nicolin was still very quiet, and seemed to be predicting the good and bad of this trip, but this trip involved too many things, and the dense causal lines made her completely unable to see through. The eighth also joined this time, still carrying a coffin. After entering the god realm, his state also changed a little, but his obsession still did not dissipate, and he also knew that he could not save his mother. But he still did not give up. This is his belief to live. Xiao Zhuya said nothing, just stared at the direction of the chaos world, where she saw a scarlet moon. Su Xiaojin and Su Xiaoli were as active as their sister, with expectations in their eyes, hoping to show their power in the next battle. Old Su, I want to go too. Lin Suying stood beside Su Xian, and the two held hands tightly with their fingers interlocked. Okay. Su Xian did not refuse. Although this battle was dangerous, he also knew his wife's temper, and he must go. Let's go. Master will take you to the chaos world to have a look. After being tossed around by these gods for so long, it's time to switch roles now. Su Xian took Lin Suying and took a step out, and they had already arrived outside the star field. 11 disciples stood behind him, lined up in a row. The only imperfection was that he did not find the 12th disciple, but Su Xian didn't care so much. There are not so many perfections in life. Moreover, he had the confidence to make up for this shortcoming. Walking in the void, Su Xian and his disciples felt the hostility from the chaos world, where there were also breaths rising. The most powerful of them was the breath of the first god envoy. The breath of the first god envoy locked onto Su Xian. In the eyes of these people, he only cared about Su Xian, and the rest of the god-level lives were not in his eyes. Su Xian, you still dare to leave the blue star world and come here. The laughter of the second god envoy echoed in everyone's ears. Do you really think you are that existence? You are still far away from him he lost. Do you think you can win? The crying mask condensed in the void. How do you know if you don't try? Su Xian smiled, what that person didn't do back then, I will make up for now. He fought alone, but I didn't. So, the ending this time will be completely different. During the conversation, Su Xian and his friends were getting closer and closer to the chaos world. What he did back then was wrong, and you just made it worse. If he hadn't interfered with the operation of the chaos world would have been complete now. Instead of being in a state of constant collapse now. The second god's voice echoed. Life and the world should be complementary to each other. Since he triggered the evolution of this chaos world, he should be allowed to evolve freely. But he interfered with the world order because of his personal feelings. He created thousands of lives and was also the culprit of the crisis of the extinction of thousands of lives. These words made Su Xian frown. The closer he got to the chaos world, the more clearly he could feel the state of the chaos world. The edge of this world was already in a state of constant collapse. And the speed of collapse was slowly increasing. This was something he hadn't expected. This situation is like when Blue Star and Lawrence Star collided and merged initially, the intersection of the two worlds would continue to collapse and merge. It is not that the collision of the worlds will definitely succeed in fusion, it is also possible that both will be destroyed. The Blue Star world was able to merge successfully because of his intervention. His ability was enough to cover the entire Blue Star world. Even so, the interior was still unstable and could lead to collapse and destruction, so he let Zhongmu take charge of the Abyss Plate and Moira take charge of the Lawrence Star Plate to maintain absolute balance. And the Chaos world is too huge, far greater than the Blue Star world. No one can fully control it. If the second envoy really wants to absorb and gather the last power left in the Blue Star world to complete the Chaos world and ensure the safety of billions of lives in the Chaos world, it is not wrong. At least from the other party's perspective, it is not wrong. But he came here today not to look at the problem from the other party's perspective. Whether it is true or false, the conflict between him and the second envoy is inevitable. Sometimes there are not so many right and wrong. In the eyes of the second envoy, perhaps the blue star world is not worth mentioning, just a tool to complete the chaos world. But in his heart, it is the soil that nurtured him, with his family and friends, the will left by his predecessors, and countless beautiful memories. He can't give up his small self and fulfill his big self. He doesn't have that mind yet. There is no room for both sides to retreat, only a battle. His footsteps did not stop, getting closer and closer to the chaos world, and he also saw the figures constantly emerging in front of him. The power of the second envoy is not that simple. Even though some god envoys are not interested in fighting, the second god envoy still has many supporters. It is the undisputed first force in the chaos world. Su Xian finally understood why the first god envoy was willing to support the second god envoy. From the perspective of the world's highest level, he obviously recognized the actions of the second god envoy. Warm Ti. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 527. Killing one person is a sin, killing 10,000 people is a hero. Some issues have actually been debated countless times in the vast world, but there has never been a correct result. The correct result is always in people's hearts. The second divine envoy is now going to refine the entire blue star world to save the larger chaos world, so naturally many lives will think that he is right. And according to the mirror god story, the second divine envoy has never shown his evil nature. In the eyes of the creatures in the chaos world, he is even the most holy and flawless divine envoy. Of course, in Su Xian's heart, he would only believe 30% of the words of the second divine envoy at most, because the second divine envoy also has a second devil's tear mask. Who knows what the second divine envoy's real purpose is? Everyone, did you see it? The supreme origin power of the ninth divine envoy and the supreme origin power of the 11th divine envoy have been taken away by Su Xian's disciples. They were born to sin. Now they still want to subvert us. The second divine envoy looked at his followers, and his voice floated in the ears of every creature. What a born out of sin! Su Xian had to sigh at the second god's ability to bewitch the soul. The two worlds were also born under the blessing of that great being. In the eyes of the other party, the chaos world was the destiny. And the creatures of the blue star world were born out of sin. In the eyes of the other party, they seemed to be born to fill the holes in the chaos world. No more words. Su Xian took the initiative to step out and stepped into the area of the chaos world. The followers of the second god rushed out. Boom! The first god's fate came straight to him. In order to avoid hurting other creatures, the two rushed into the void at the same time. Zhongmu rushed towards the fourth god's conqueror. With the master away, only he and Qingqing had the ability to fight against these gods. Xianyu and Qingqing faced the second god. Even though it was the first time she used this power, she still had full confidence in her invention. Cover me. Xiao Li held the hammer of creation. Under the cover of her fellow apprentices, she kept rushing into the chaos world. She had only one goal, the Tower of Despair. Rush into the top floor of the Tower of Despair and get the supreme origin of the Dragon King intercepted by the God of Death. Those creatures in the chaos world could not stop her at all. Even the god-level creatures still had only one hammer in front of her. Her fighting skills were zero. Only one hammer. A hammer that must hit. Sweep all the way. The unstoppable Xiaoli quickly rushed into the Tower of Despair. The moment she entered the Tower of Despair, the surrounding atmosphere changed immediately, and the atmosphere outside completely disappeared. 100 floors. Xiaoli looked up at the first floor that was like the sky, and there was a little more curiosity in her confident eyes. This Tower of Despair was really different. In front of her, a group of monsters that she had never seen before appeared. Finally here. Xylee swung the sledgehammer and smashed all the monsters with one hammer. The monsters here are really powerful. If a demigod comes, I'm afraid he may not even be able to get through the first floor. After finishing the first floor, Xylee quickly entered the second floor. During this process, the Tower of Despair did not drop any supplements. No wonder it is called the Tower of Despair. The higher you go, the greater the consumption, but the stronger the enemies you encounter. It can indeed make living beings despair. One layer, one small world. One small world, one hammer. The second floor, the third floor, the fourth floor. Xylee is unstoppable. With the strength of one hammer after another, he broke through the 95th floor, and finally sat on the ground to take a breath. The strength of Xylee holding the hammer of creation is no longer comparable to that of ordinary god-level life. If you get the supreme source power of the explosive Dragon King, you will definitely be able to reach a higher level. 96th floor. Xylee continued to go up. The 96th floor is a white-haired old man carrying many weapons. He is completely different from the previous monsters. He is also a human and looks very powerful. Facing this old man, she spent a lot of effort, and finally relied on her powerful strength to break the opponent's superb and perfect sword moves. This is called breaking all laws with one force. Then came the 97th, 98th, and 99th floors. Each floor was guarded by a powerful enemy, but they were still no match for her hammer after hammer. After defeating the tower guard on the 99th floor, Xylee had already used up most of her original power. If it weren't for the fact that some of the power was stored in the creation hammer, this would probably be her limit. No wonder it was called the Tower of Despair, and she had such a hard time walking there. For others, it was indeed despair. Who? Is it finally the last floor? Xylee carried the sledgehammer and stepped onto the stairs leading to the 100th floor of the Tower of Despair. Her father and a group of junior brothers and sisters were waiting for her, so she couldn't delay too long. When she arrived at the last floor, a violent breath swept over instantly. Roar! It's the big evil dragon. Xylee looked at the huge sub-dragon that occupied most of the world in front of him. Not only was he not panicked, but he was very happy. Didn't he come here just to find this big evil dragon? She looked down at her palm again. The little flame her father had left her had disappeared, which also verified the identity of the big evil dragon in front of her. The confrontation between Xylee and the projection of the explosive Dragon King was like the towering heaven and earth and a speck of dust. The young Xylee was not even 1/10,000th the size of a scale of the exploding Dragon King's projection, but Xylee's momentum was not weak at all. When she raised the hammer of creation in her hand, it was going to overwhelm the projection of the exploding Dragon King. Bigger. Bigger. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Xylee held her breath, and only her hammer could be seen between heaven and earth. Although she didn't know how to put it away, the teacher said that the hammer would be enough. Xylee, hammered out a piece of sky. Boom! The huge hammer that covered the sky and the sun smashed directly at the projection of the exploding Dragon King. Although the latter was a projection, it was once the ultimate power of this chaotic universe. The two collided. The entire Tower of Despair trembled at this moment. The hammer of creation burst out with golden and grey light, pressing down bit by bit. After all, the past was the past. No matter how strong the projection of the exploding Dragon King was, it was unconscious. Facing the Xylee holding the hammer of creation, she was defeated. Bang! The speed of the hammer falling was getting faster and faster, and finally it smashed through the shadow of the exploding Dragon King and fell to the ground, making a thunderous roar. The shadow of the exploding Dragon King disappeared. Only a small ball of power source remained there. Xylee ran over quickly and stared at the power source curiously. This should be the supreme source of power that my father asked me to seize, but I am so tired. She grabbed the ball of supreme source of power with one hand, and even had the desire to eat it in one bite. But she remembered her father's advice that this thing cannot be eaten raw, it must be processed before it can be eaten, so she could only take it out first. 10,000 times return. I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 528. Outside, a group of disciples were fighting against the army of the second god envoy. Except for Su Xian, who was at ease, the other disciples were obviously at a disadvantage when facing the suppression of the old god envoy and many gods. At this moment, there was movement in the Tower of Despair. A golden light and a bright red color rushed from the top of the Tower of Despair, rushing straight into the army of the second god envoy, unstoppable. The supreme original power of the exploding Dragon King. The second god envoy exclaimed. In fact, she had guessed it a long time ago, but she had never had the opportunity to verify it, because the god of death ignored him. Even the first god envoy, the fateful one, could not pose any threat to the god of death. So he could only endure it silently. Unexpectedly, the god of death also helped the one back then. Boom. The moment Xylee came out with the supreme original power of the exploding Dragon King, the second god envoy immediately manifested the devil's tears and rushed towards Xylee. But Su Xian was faster. The space vibrated, and Su Xian came to Xylee in the blink of an eye, and took the supreme source power of the exploding Dragon King first, and at the same time sacrificed the Chaos Millstone to wipe out the will. The first and second divine messengers came together. Su Xian protected Xylee behind him, and slashed with a sword, forcing the two divine messengers to retreat at the same time. Even if he is not fighting at home, his current strength can still suppress the first divine messenger, the fateful one. Xylee, absorb it. Su Xian could feel the fit between Xylee and this group of supreme source power, so he let Xylee absorb it on the spot. With one more supreme combat power, the hope of winning this game would be greater. Good. Xylee swallowed the purified supreme source power in one gulp. Rumble. At the moment when she swallowed this group of source power, the entire chaotic world suddenly shook, and there were terrifying breaths rising. Even Su Xian felt a strong sense of oppression and restraint. It was as if the sky and the surrounding star fields were bound by invisible chains. Is this the operating rule of the chaos world? The only thing that could make him feel oppressed was the operating rule of the chaos world, which was also the operating rule of this chaotic universe. Such movement. It also further verified that the rules of the chaotic universe had already developed self-awareness. He looked into the distance, and the rising breaths were the gods. In addition to the first god, the Destiner, the second god, the Weeping Eye, the fourth god, the Conqueror, and the two fallen ninth gods, Creator and Exploding Dragon King, and the 11th god, the Lord of the Abyss. There were 6 remaining breaths, which were the other 6 gods. The two-color light arrived first. It was the third god, the good and evil bird, who was known as the overlord of the sky and had the same body of good and evil. But the good and evil bird at this time was quite different from what Su Xian imagined. There was a faint gray mist on the eyes of the good and evil bird, as if something was forcibly controlling its mind. It should be the rules of the chaos world. According to the description of the mirror god, these gods did not belong to the second god camp, but came with hatred at this moment, and only the rules of the chaotic universe could control them. After the third god, the bird of good and evil, the imprisoned fifth god, the invisible one, also rushed over, and the latter's mind was even in a state of madness. Then came the sixth god, the Black Plague, whose terrifying virus power could even infect gods. As soon as he appeared, the surrounding space and breath were completely corroded and turned into Black Plague viruses. Then came the seventh god, the Devourer. It was not until this moment that Su Xian saw how big the seventh god was. Its complete body covered half of the chaotic world. Crushing all the way, everything was swallowed into the mouth of the Devourer without distinction. The fifth, sixth, and seventh three gods all had some mental defects, and now they were completely reduced to thugs of the rules of the universe. The third god seemed to have at least some self-awareness. Su Xian, now that you are here, you should be prepared to die here. I have to thank you. If all the power had not been gathered together, perhaps the rules of the chaotic universe would not have completed the process of self-awareness so quickly. You will eventually return to the chaotic world. This is the arrangement of fate and you cannot escape it. For billions of lives. The second divine envoy was completely uncontrolled by the rules of the chaotic universe, or it could be said that they had already established a certain cooperative relationship. Boom. The sea shook, and the eighth divine envoy who inherited the power of the god of the sea source also left the sea and came here. Even the 12th divine envoy, the holy light, who was traveling in the small world, rushed back from outside the star field. These divine envoys who were not in the second divine envoy camp were all controlled by the rules of the chaotic universe, but those first-generation supreme gods who were also under the rules of the universe were not controlled. The four first-generation supreme gods, the god of death, the god of mirror, the god of ghosts, and the god of the elf ancestor, still acted as they pleased. At that time, of the 16 supreme gods, 12 were killed by that person, and the original divine power of the 12 supreme gods was implanted into the will by the rules of the universe. So the gods can only be controlled. Looking at the controlled gods, Su Xian was not too panicked. Since he was here, he naturally took into account everything that might happen. However, he was surprised that the rules of the chaotic universe showed hostility so quickly. It should be that Xyli brought out the supreme original divine power of the explosive Dragon King, and the original power of the 12 gods gathered with himself, the person who inherited that power, which triggered the series of changes. Then come. Su Xian looked at the invisible chains surrounding the sky. It seems that the rules of the chaotic universe are just like this, not omnipotent, and are still part of the composition of the chaotic universe, not the master. The four first-generation supreme gods cannot be controlled. The god of death can even snatch food from the tiger's mouth, leaving the rules helpless. It can only prove that the power of the rules is not invincible, or that the real rules of the chaotic universe have not been shaken. What is dealing with them now is only the self-consciousness of the birth of the rules. Want to use the lives of countless creatures in the entire blue star world to fill the defects of the chaotic world and keep the rules intact. At this point, Su Xian also confirmed this. But he felt that the second envoy should have a deeper plan. Angel Tears might really care about the thousands of creatures in the chaotic world, but the demon phase would never do so. At this moment, there are already 9 supreme powers on the opposite side, as well as the oppression and assistance of the rules of the chaotic universe. And there are only 3 on his side. They are still just adapting to the supreme power for the first time, and the balance of combat power has completely lost balance. The second divine envoy also maintained absolute confidence at this time, quietly looking at Su Xian, as if he had him in his grasp. Su Xian remained calm. Behind him, the 5-colored mysterious light rotated. After entering the game for so long, he certainly arranged a backup plan for himself, and he couldn't just rely on his predecessors. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 529. 5 colors of black light, blue, green, purple, gray, chaotic gray. It's not just the second divine envoy who can communicate the rules of the chaotic universe, he can too. And because World Tree and Blue Star World achieve each other, the will of Blue Star World is completely inclined to him, even if it is just without self-awareness of will. Furthermore, he can also use part of the power of the chaotic world. That being was the pioneer of the chaotic world, so how could he be completely suppressed by the rules of the universe and unable to resist? Boom! With the vast power of rules, the invisible chains were broken open. Su Xian took one step forward and rushed towards the sky. A layer of gray aura rippled around his body, blocking all the pressure. The disciples felt their shoulders relax and feel much more relaxed. The terrifying pressure just now really gave them a sense of suffocation. If they fought in that situation, they would probably not be able to defeat the opponent at all. Zhang Mu looked excited. Is everything really according to Master's plan? Except when he was a little panicked when the Master had been sleeping for 18 years, he had extremely blind trust in the Master at other times. In his heart, there was nothing that the Master could not do. Hee, Dad is so awesome. Xiao Li carries a sledgehammer. Now she is truly the ultimate in the power of the chaotic universe. She can hit anyone with a sledgehammer. Don't be too happy too early. Xianyu and Qing pouted. Teacher blocked that pressure. These divine envoys are not vegetarians, and the chance of winning is still slim. Just hit him. Sun Xiaokong stared intently at the fourth divine envoy conqueror, who carried many weapons and had extremely superb combat skills. Leave that to me, I want to have a chance with him. Oh, the fourth child has already provoked an opponent. Miao Tian smiled and said, I'll just choose one. That guy is quite suitable. Miao Tian chose the 12th divine envoy Holy Light because the aura of the Holy Light and the ghost and god power in him were extremely mutually exclusive, so he chose this choice. Then I will. Lao Liu's confused eyes wandered between the 5th divine envoy the Invisible One and the 7th divine envoy Devourer. Let's choose him. In the end, he chose the weaker-looking 5th divine envoy, the Invisible One, because the 7th divine envoy was too big, and it probably couldn't grow this big at its maximum. I choose her. The most determined one is undoubtedly Zioki Nicola Lin. He never glanced at the other gods from beginning to end, always staring at the crying eyes of the 2nd divine envoy. The crying eye, who claims to have inherited the power of the god of destiny, is indeed somewhat similar to her. Lao Ba Wuxin didn't need to say more. He said that the direction he faced was his choice, and it was the 3rd divine envoy, the good and evil bird. Looking at the senior brothers and sisters who were picking each other up, little Juyuya wanted to ask, are you polite? The opponent is the supreme combat power of the chaos universe, and we are still one level behind. But she had to admit that following her senior brothers and sisters, she always felt an inexplicable sense of self-confidence. Perhaps it was because she had a senior brother who followed the teacher without thinking, and a second senior sister who was so confident that she could break through the sky. Those who are close to vermilion are red, those who are close to ink are black. She could only be infected. I choose. Little Juyuya glanced over and finally selected the 8th divine envoy who was also good at mental power and control, the infinite one who inherited the power of the god of the sea. Wait for little Juyuya to finish choosing. The remaining Su Xiaojin and Su Xiaoxiao couldn't wait and pointed at the most powerful 1st divine envoy, Destiny. I choose him. The two brothers and sisters even have such a tacit understanding when choosing their opponents. Zhang Mu smiled and said, the 1st divine envoy, Destiny, is the strongest among them. Junior brothers and sisters should think carefully about it. It will be embarrassing if they cannot defeat him when the time comes. Can beat it? The brother and sister once again answered in unison. Let's do this, you two together. Xianyu and Qing suggested that any one of them had no hope of winning in a one-on-one challenge with the 1st divine envoy, but Su Xiaojin and Su Xiaoxiao had a slight chance of winning together. Because one of them is good at time power and the other is good at space power, the combination can produce qualitative changes. The brother and sister looked at each other. Although they looked disgusted on the surface, they didn't say anything in the end. They followed the arrangements of the 3rd senior sister and knew that the overall situation was the top priority. This is not the time for them to be willful. Everyone seems to be very casual, but everyone must be more nervous than the other. If you are not careful, everything may be lost. I act relaxed because I don't want to put pressure on others. Xian Yuan Qing added, leave the sixth divine envoy Black Plague to me. I have done research on his clones and have restrained him, so there should be no big problem. Xiao Li warned the seventh divine envoy Devourer, then let me deal with this big guy. He looks a bit clumsy. In this way, all 12 divine envoys were selected. Zhang Mu did not argue, just smiled, then I will have to clear out the other enemies with my wife. You have to work hard. Whoever is supported by me first will be laughed at. It's not me anyway. Xiao Li was the first to rush out and headed straight for the seventh god's devourer. Other disciples also rushed out one after another. Above the sky, Su Xian, who was fighting against the power of the rules of the chaotic universe, was quite pleased to see the disciples coming out. Courage was most important at this time. Fortunately, none of his disciples backed down at the critical moment. Although God-level beings that condense the will of freedom are stronger than ordinary God-level beings, their combat power is still not enough to face the supreme God level. Even though most of these divine messengers could not exert their full strength. At this moment, including Zhang Mu, all the disciples burst out with the strongest power in their lives. Knowing that they could not win, they still fought hard. In their hearts, they were able to accompany their teacher to this point. Being able to fight for the Blue Star World, they had no regrets in their hearts. The spiritual power of the disciples gathered, as if Su Xian had obtained a certain kind of sublimation. The system in his body disappeared at this moment, turning into the ultimate power and merging into his body. Star-like divine light burst out from his eyes. Then his arms turned into crystal-like crystal. The whole body fell into an evolutionary state again, but this was not evolution. His chaotic body was originally the top physique in the chaotic universe. These were the reactions of the system merging into the body. The eyes of the divine mentor, the hands of the divine mentor, the heart of the divine mentor. Everything was the point of connection between him and his disciples. The spiritual power of the disciples transformed, and the life level was about to reach its peak. Gathered here, it became a resonance of the soul. Su Xian closed his eyes, and 11 figures appeared in his mind. His original power was connected with his disciples. The system disappeared. But the purpose of the system's existence had been achieved. The relationship between him and his disciples no longer needed to be maintained by the system. The bond between master and disciple had long been deeply rooted and inseparable. 10,000 times return, I am a mentor in the Novice Village. Author, Mingtong Shui. Chapter 530. Soul Resonance. Su Xian's original power was directly released, feeding back to many disciples, and the disciples' power continued to increase. Boom! 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 All the disciples felt the powerful source of energy, which made them reach another level briefly, enough to compete with these supreme gods. I knew that Dad must have a backup plan. Xylee was holding a sledgehammer, very excited. No matter how big the size of the seventh god's devourer was, it was still directly penetrated by her hammer. The absolute extreme power can even completely suppress space. The devourer's fighting skills are extremely low, and he can only rely on his huge and almost immortal body to resist, and occasionally emit powerful energy rays. But these things are not enough in front of Xylee. Facing Xylee, who is stronger than a hammer, the devourer's size is getting smaller and smaller, but every time it is smaller to a certain size, it will start a large devouring mode. Swallow everything around it, and then recover some. This style of play poses almost no threat to Xylee, but the constant consumption makes Xylee very impatient. The third child Xian Yuan Qing faces the sixth god envoy Black Plague. In addition to the Wanda body transplanted to her by her teacher in the early days, her physique has been transformed by various drugs she has studied, and she is not afraid of the toxins of the Black Plague at all. The strongest thing about the sixth god envoy is the toxin attack. Its own attack power is pitifully weak, but Kinking's own attack power is not very strong either. If she wants to kill the Black Plague, she needs to constantly find its weaknesses in the battle and develop a method to completely restrain it. This process is destined to not be achieved overnight. She is full of confidence that she can kill the Black Plague, but she doesn't know if the other junior brothers and sisters can hold on. After all, except for her, the eldest brother and the second sister, the rest have not received the true supreme source power. They must rely on the teacher's support to resolve the battle as soon as possible. Otherwise, the teacher will have to support them while fighting against the chaotic universe rule consciousness alone, which will be too much for the teacher. If they win a game here, it will also be of great help to the teacher. The fourth oldest, Sun Xiaokong, was also fighting the fourth god conqueror with great enthusiasm. The fourth god was not controlled by the rules of the chaotic universe, and his self-awareness was extremely strong. He had a smile of enjoyment on his face, and even admired Sun Xiaokong. What he looked forward to most was to continue fighting with various strong men. The strong fighting spirit and the will to become stronger with each battle seemed to make him find a confidant. In the case of absolute advantage, the fourth god did not suppress him, but kept letting him go, giving Sun Xiaokong space to counterattack. He could see that Sun Xiaokong was getting stronger and stronger under this kind of training, and he also hoped to have a peak battle with him. He challenged various strong men in countless small worlds in various realms, but no life had ever defeated him. The only duel with the Fateful was also interrupted by the second god. So he would not miss this opportunity. The fifth oldest, Miao Tian, was not so lucky in his battle with the 12th god Holy Light. The Holy Lighter, who was controlled by the rules of the chaotic universe, was almost fatal in every move, and the power of the Holy Lighter was mutually restrained with him. In this case, the disadvantage of the weaker party would be extremely obvious. After all, the Holy Lighter was a supreme being at the same level as the ghosts and gods, but he had inherited some of the power of the ghosts and gods and had almost no ability to resist the Holy Lighter. Fortunately, with the support of the teacher, he was not eliminated, but he could only barely resist. The sixth elder Mai Wang had the advantage from the beginning. The fifth god envoy Invisible was already in a state of mental madness, and his attacks were disorderly. He could only rely on a large-scale mental shock to hurt it. But as a member of the original Spirit Clan, Mai Wang was not afraid of mental shock at all. In addition to his special physique, it was because his mental power was not weak. On the contrary, his mental attack could make the fifth god envoy, who was already in a state of madness, even more mentally confused. Several mental powers rushed in the mind of the fifth god envoy, making him miserable. The most harmonious battle was the duel between Little Seven Nicolin and the second god messenger Weeping Eye. Neither side took action directly, but floated in the air with their eyes closed. In the eyes of outsiders, they seemed to be resting. Only those who were fighting knew how dangerous this duel was. If they were not careful, their souls could be destroyed. Countless lines of fate and cause and effect surrounded the two. Behind Lin were the phantoms of thousands of stars, and behind Weeping Eye was the mask with tears and countless creatures kneeling under the mask. Both of them were calculating the death of the other party. Once forced into a dead end, the ending would be doomed. The most bizarre battle was the duel between Old 8 Wuxin and the third god messenger Good and Evil Bird. Beside Old 8 Wuxin, the soul particles were as vast as a cosmic storm, completely protecting Wuxin in the center, and the Good and Evil Bird did not even have a chance to get close. And these soul particles were extremely lethal to the Good and Evil Bird. It seemed that the good and evil forces in his body collided, and the collision of good and evil divine forces affected the Good and Evil Bird, and the powerful fluctuations also caused great harm to Wuxin. The invisible fluctuations directly passed through the soul particles and impacted his soul. Both of them felt that demons were dancing wildly in their minds. It was not a normal brain to begin with, and at this moment it was completely in chaos. From the outside, the game between the two sides seemed extremely strange. From time to time, it would fight itself, so that the spectators could not see the situation clearly. The most magnificent battle was the duel between Little Nine Crescent and the 8th god Envoy Infinite. The battle between the two was like each leading tens of millions of soldiers. Beside Little Nine Crescent, various spirits, big and small, were born endlessly, not only abyssal spirits, but also various strange spirits. The octopus-like 8th god Envoy Infinite was an infinite derivative of small octopuses, and these octopuses all carried a trace of his spiritual power. The duel between the two was the constant destruction and birth of the younger brothers. Little Nine Crescent looked at the purple moon in the sky. She had been looking for the opportunity to sense it from the beginning, and was gradually adapting to the power of the purple moonlight. Her strength was also increasing bit by bit. With the help of the teacher, she was now completely able to match the Supreme. But she also knew that external forces were external forces after all, and she had to win as soon as possible. She couldn't put too much burden on the teacher. In this battle, Miao Tian, whose power was restrained, was the most miserable, but the most miserable was not Miao Tian, but the two brothers and sisters of the Su family who faced the strongest god. The two brothers and sisters joined forces, but were still completely suppressed by the first god's fate.